75 winters have passed since my hometown committed its quietest sin. Not a crime of passion, not a moment of violence, but a slow, suffocating act of forgetting. On December 3rd, 1949, under a sky choked with Kentucky stars, a front door clicked shut on Main Street. 17-year-old Muriel Baldridge stepped into the brittle cold, cheerleader's sweater under her coat, schoolbooks tucked under her arm, breath hanging in the air like a ghost already forming. She walked past the familiar glow of porch lights, past the skeletal winter trees, and vanished, just vanished. By dawn, Prestonsburg wasn't just a town waking up. It was a place holding its breath. Muriel wasn't just missing. She was unwritten. That shy smile that crinkled her eyes when she nailed a difficult cheer, the way she'd hum along to the radio while helping at her dad's hardware store, the future she sketched out in notebooks, nursing school, maybe a family right here in these hills, all of it, erased in the space of one frozen night. They called it a disappearance at first, then a tragedy, then a ghost story. Whispers in the high school halls. Shadows blamed on poor Muriel near the riverbank. But Muriel Baldridge wasn't a specter. She wasn't folklore. She was flesh and blood. She bled real blood into the Lavisa Fork River. She left behind a mother who screamed herself silent and a father who aged 20 years in 20 days. This isn't a tale about a restless spirit haunting the old bridge. It's about a real girl, murdered, a real crime, unsolved, and a real town, my town, that looked into the abyss of its own peaceful facade 75 years ago, flinched, and has spent every decade since trying to bury the secret deeper than winter frost. The secret of who killed Muriel Baldridge and why we all turned away. To understand the shock, you have to feel Prestonsburg in 1949. Imagine a town stitched together by coal dust and creek water, where the whistle of the 4:15 p.m. train was everyone's pocket watch, where front porches weren't just wood and paint, they were gossip hubs. Confessionals, the nightly news delivered in rocking chairs. Friday nights meant the clack of the ticket reel at the Star Theater, the buttery smell of popcorn spilling onto Main Street. Saturdays, the high school football field roared under generator lights, the whole valley echoing with cheers. You knew the rhythm of this place like your own heartbeat, the sharp tang of honeysuckle cutting through the coal smoke haze in summer, the way frost would lace the window panes of Doc Howard's pharmacy come November. And the people, they weren't just neighbors, they were threads in a living tapestry. Miss Edna knew how you took your coffee before you ordered it. Old Man Jenkins at the hardware store saved bent nails for your pa's shed project. If you sneezed on your porch at dawn, 3 ladies would have chicken soup on your stoop by noon. And right there, woven into that tapestry, was Muriel Baldridge, 17, lived 2 blocks from Peaburg High in the white clapboard house with the blue hydrangeas out front. Captain of the cheer squad, not because she was the loudest, but because she had this quiet spark. The kind of girl who'd blush if you caught her humming Patty Page's Tennessee Waltz while shelving canned goods at her dad's store. Quick to laugh, but thoughtful too. Always the first to notice if someone was left out on the bleachers. Her world was small, bright, predictable. Homework at the Formica kitchen table. Pep rallies under Friday night lights. Walking to Betty's house past houses where porch lights glowed like guardian angels. That's what Prestonsburg sold itself on, safety. Doors left unlocked. Kids running free until the street lights flickered on. The kind of place where bad things happen somewhere else, in big cities. In headlines, in the flickering shadows of the movie screen. Not here. Never here. Muriel's walk to her cousin's house that night? 2 streets. Past homes where families she'd known since kindergarten were eating supper. Under a sky she'd stared at 1,000 times. It was ordinary. It was safe. Until December 3rd, 1949. Ripped that ordinary, safe world clean in half. It was just after 6 p.m. on December 3rd. Muriel stood in the warm rectangle of light from her family's kitchen doorway. Finals were closing in, algebra, history, and she'd promised her mom she'd only be gone a few hours. Betty's got the notes from Tuesday when I was out with that cold, she said, buttoning her blue wool coat over her cheer sweater, the one with the felt piece sewn onto the sleeve. Her schoolbooks, a worn algebra primer, a history text with a cracked spine, were tucked under her arm. Her breath made little clouds in the porch light. Straight there and straight back. Her mother called from the kitchen, the smell of simmering beans and cornbread trailing after her. Home by 9. Muriel. It's dark early now. Muriel nodded. Promise. Mom. A quick smile. The door clicked shut behind her. 2 streets. That's all it was. Down her own sidewalk. Past the Carsons' house where Mr. Carson was already tuning in the radio to the Lone Ranger. Left at the corner where Mrs. Gable's tabby cat always watched from the windowsill. Then right on to Maple, where Betty's house sat, yellow porch light on. A beacon in the gathering dark. 10 minutes if she walked slow. 7 if she hurried. A path she'd taken 100 times since grade school. But Betty waited, and waited. 7 o'clock came. 7:30. The pot of cocoa Betty's mother made went cold on the stove. At 8, Betty called the Baldridge house. Muriel left hours ago, her mother said, the first note of confusion tightening her voice. 9 o'clock. Muriel's empty chair at the kitchen table. Her untouched dinner keeping warm in the oven. Her father paced, first annoyed, then uneasy. By 10, he was pulling on his work coat, grabbing the heavy flashlight from the shelf by the door. Its beam cut shaky arcs through the freezing dark as he pounded on neighbors' doors. Have you seen Muriel? Muriel Baldridge? She was headed to Betty's. Midnight. The town wasn't sleeping now. Porch lights flickered on up and down Main Street. Men in hats and coats gathered under street lamps. Breath steaming, voices low and urgent. Muriel's mother stood in the doorway, her knuckles white on the frame, staring into the blackness where her daughter had vanished. Just before dawn, Sheriff Clay pulled up in his cruiser, gravel crunching under the tires. He'd been down by the river with a few deputies, their flashlight beams sweeping the icy banks. He walked up the Baldridge steps. Hat in hand, his face was grim. He didn't need to say missing person. The look in his eyes said everything when he met Muriel's father on the porch. Charlie, the sheriff said, his voice rough with the cold and the weight of what he couldn't yet prove. Something's happened. Something's happened to that Baldridge girl. In that moment, Prestonsburg stopped being the town where everyone knew your name. It became the town holding its breath, waiting for a nightmare to take shape. For 3 days, Prestonsburg held its breath. Search parties fanned out through the hills. Men waded through frozen creeks, calling Muriel's name until their voices cracked. Women kept coffee hot on stoves, praying for a miracle. Flyers with Muriel's school photo, that shy smile, the dark curls, appeared in shop windows and on telephone poles. Hope was a thin thread, fraying by the hour. Then, on the morning of December 6th, the river spoke. Lavisa Fork. That old brown river curled around the edge of town like a tired snake. It carried coal barges, fishing skiffs, and the secrets of the hills down to the Ohio. That Tuesday was cold and gray. 2 boys, Tommy Jenkins, 12, and his little brother Ben, 10, were down by Miller's Bend, skipping flat stones across the sluggish water. Tommy was aiming for the rusted skeleton of an old truck dumped halfway out in the current. Plink, plink. Ben wandered closer to the bank, poking at driftwood with a stick. The reeds here grew thick and brown, taller than a man in places, rattling dryly in the wind. Something pale caught his eye. Not driftwood, not a plastic bag. Tommy. Ben's voice was small. What's that? Tommy turned. Stone still in hand. He squinted. A shape, half hidden in the reeds. Pale. Too still. They moved closer. The reeds parted. An arm. A pale arm. Bent wrong. Like a broken branch. The hand was blue-white. Fingers curled inward. Water lapped gently around the elbow. Tommy froze. His stone dropped with a soft thud in the mud. Then he saw the rest. Muriel Baldridge lay on her side, half in the water, half on the muddy bank. Her head was turned away from them. Her dark hair was matted with mud and river weeds. She was still wearing her blue wool coat, but it was soaked black, heavy with water. Her cheerleading skirt, royal blue and gold. The one she wore under her coat to Betty's, was torn near the hip, ripped cloth snagged on a broken reed. One saddle shoe was missing. The other was caked thick with mud. The worst part was her head, a dark, ugly wound above her left ear. Not a cut, a deep, crushed place. The skin around it was swollen. Purple and black. The boys didn't scream. They didn't run. They stood rooted to the spot, staring. The river gurgled. A crow cawed overhead. The world felt too quiet, too still. Tommy grabbed Ben's arm. Hard. They stumbled backwards, slipping in the mud. Then they ran. They ran like the devil himself was snapping at their heels. Up the bank, through the scrubby trees, toward the first house they saw. They hammered on Mrs. Gable's back door, gasping, crying, pointing back toward the river. It's Muriel. Tommy choked out. She's down there. She's dead. Within minutes, Sheriff Clay's car skidded to a halt on the gravel road above the bend. Deputies followed, boots crunching on frozen ground. Doc Henderson, the town's weary old physician and acting coroner, climbed out behind them, his black medical bag clutched tight. They found her just as the boys described. The sheriff knelt in the mud beside her, his face gray. He didn't touch her. Not yet. He just looked at the torn skirt, looked at the terrible wound on her head, looked at the dark bruises circling her thin wrists like cruel bracelets. Bruises that spoke of struggle, of hands holding her down. Doc Henderson moved slowly. He checked for a pulse he knew he wouldn't find. He gently turned her head to examine the wound. His fingers probed carefully. Blunt force trauma, he said flatly, his voice sounding too loud in the hushed quiet by the river. Something heavy, solid. He looked around at the muddy bank, the scattered rocks. Could be a rock, could be a pipe, a piece of timber. He paused, looking at the sheriff. Hit her hard, very hard, likely knocked her unconscious. He noted the position of the body, the way the water tugged at her legs. He saw the mud caked deep under her fingernails. He saw the scrapes on her palms, like she'd clawed at the ground. Then Doc Henderson said the words that would echo through Prestonsburg for decades. Words that turned a terrible murder into something unspeakably worse. The blow to the head, it probably would have killed her eventually, he said, his voice low and heavy. But it didn't kill her fast enough. He pointed to the waterline lapping at her waist. See the mud in her nose? Her mouth? Her lungs will be full of river water. He looked the sheriff straight in the eye, the horror dawning in his own. She was still breathing when she went into this water. Clay. She was alive. She drowned. The air left the sheriff's lungs. He stared at the river, brown and cold and indifferent. It hadn't just taken Muriel Baldridge. It had listened to her struggle. It had felt her gasp. It had filled her lungs while her killer walked away. The men stood in silence. The only sound was the river, chewing at the bank, pulling gently at Muriel's legs. It sounded like a whisper, like a secret the water would never tell. News traveled. Fast. A terrible, sickening wave rolling through the town. Muriel Baldridge wasn't missing anymore. She was dead, found in the river, murdered. The thin thread of hope snapped. It was replaced by a cold, hard knot of fear, and a question that clawed at everyone's mind. Who could do this? Who could smash a 17-year-old girl's head and leave her to drown in the freezing dark? Who walked among them, sat beside them in church, maybe waved hello just yesterday with blood on their hands? The river held Muriel's body, but it gave no answers. Only the terrible, silent scream of how she died, alive in the water, fighting for breath that wouldn't come, alone in the dark with the reeds and the cold and the crushing weight of the river. The nightmare wasn't just real. It was worse than anyone had dared to imagine. Prestonsburg wasn't holding its breath anymore. It was drowning in the horror of what the river had finally given back. The shock of finding Muriel's body hardened into something heavier, fear. Prestonsburg stopped feeling like home. It felt like a cage. Doors that used to stay open all day clicked shut. Curtains twitched shut when someone walked by on the sidewalk. Friendly smiles froze on faces. Everyone looked at everyone else with new eyes. Suspicious eyes. Could it be him? What about her? Sheriff Clay knew he had to move fast. Murder wasn't something his small department handled. State police came down from Frankfurt, men in sharp suits and harder faces. They set up shop in the courthouse basement. The air smelled like stale coffee, cigarette smoke, and desperation. First on their list, Bobby Ray Haskins, Muriel's ex-boyfriend, 18. Worked the night shift at the Black Star coal mine. Alongside his pa, Bobby Ray was a big kid, strong from hauling rock. They'd broken up just 2 weeks before Muriel disappeared. Not clean. People saw them arguing outside the Dixie Belle diner. Loud. He'd slammed his fist on the hood of his truck. Muriel walked away crying. The detectives brought Bobby Ray in. Not gently. They sat him in a hard wooden chair under a bright, hot light, asked him where he was the night Muriel vanished. Workin', Bobby Ray mumbled. Eyes on the floor. Down the mine. Ask my foreman. Ask anybody on shift. They checked. His foreman vouched for him. Said Bobby Ray was underground hauling coal cars from 6 p.m. until 2 a.m. Solid alibi. But the detectives didn't let up. They pushed. Asked about the fight at the diner. Asked if he was angry. Jealous. Asked if he ever followed Muriel. If he knew she might be seeing someone else. Bobby Ray's face went red. I loved her, he shouted, banging his fist on the table. I wouldn't hurt her. Never. They held him for 18 hours. Searched his truck. Found nothing. No blood. No torn blue cloth. No heavy pipe. They let him go. He walked out pale, shoulders hunched. The whole town watching. The whispers started before he was even off the courthouse steps. Guilty people get angry. Maybe his friends lied for him. Maybe he slipped out of the mine. Next, Mr. Henderson. Not the doctor. The other one. Walter Henderson, the high school shop teacher. Quiet man. Lived alone in a small house behind the Methodist church. Never married. Kids sometimes whispered he looked at the cheerleaders a little too long. He'd been at school late the night Muriel vanished. Grading papers. He told the principal. Alone in his workshop. Detectives sat across from him at his own scarred workbench. Sawdust hung in the air. What papers were you grading? Mr. Henderson, they asked. His hands shook. He couldn't remember exactly. Woodworking plans. Maybe. Attendance sheets? He was vague. Nervous. Sweat beaded on his forehead. They searched his house. His workshop. Looked for bloodstains on the concrete floor. Looked for a heavy tool. A wrench. A pipe. Anything that could crush a skull. They found nothing. Just wood shavings and neat rows of chisels. No alibi. No proof. Just a nervous man who lived alone. It was enough to ignite the town. He was there. He was alone. He's odd. Must be him. Rumors exploded like sparks in dry grass. Wildfires of suspicion tearing through the streets. Heard it was a drifter. Hobo hopping off the freight train that stopped for water Tuesday night. Seen near the river by Old Man Miller. Jealousy. Had to be. Sally Jenkins saw Muriel talking to that college boy home for Thanksgiving at the drugstore. Looked real friendly. Betty Miller was green with envy. I tell you, Betty lived right on Maple Street. Saw Muriel walking that night. The Harper boy. Always trouble. That one. Got kicked off the football team for fighting. Seen skulking near the Baldridge house the week before. Every whisper, every pointed finger, landed on the sheriff's desk. Every name, every sighting, every scrap of gossip had to be chased down. Detectives knocked on doors, asked questions, checked alibis. The drifter? Couldn't be found. Probably never existed. The college boy? Back at university in Lexington. Confirmed by his dorm matron. The Harper kid? Homesick with his mama all night. Fever of 102. Betty Miller? Heartbroken at losing her friend. But home baking cookies with her grandmother. Alibi solid as stone. Frustration built. Leads dried up like puddles in July. No murder weapon. The river hadn't given it up. Muriel's clothes yielded no strange hairs. No foreign fingerprints, just mud and river water. The head wound told them how she was killed. But not with what, and certainly not by who. Someone suggested the killer might have thrown the weapon into Miller's pond. A deep, murky fishing hole near the spot where Muriel was last seen walking. Hope, thin and desperate, flickered. The sheriff got pumps. Big, noisy diesel pumps. For 3 days, they sucked that pond dry. Men in hip waders slogged through knee-deep stinking mud, feeling with their hands, raking through weeds. Townsfolk gathered. On the banks. Silent. Watching. Waiting for the glint of metal. The shape of a pipe. A bloody rock. They found old tires. A bicycle frame. Beer bottles. A rusted toaster. No weapon. Nothing that could have crushed Muriel Baldridge's skull. Just more mud and disappointment. The state police packed up their typewriters and their sharp suits. The case wasn't closed. But it was cold. Ice cold. The file went into a metal cabinet in the courthouse basement. Thin. Disappointingly thin. Just witness statements that went nowhere. Medical examiner reports detailing the horror of her death. Maps with circles drawn where she was last seen. Where she was found. And one last note. Scribbled in pencil by the lead state detective before he left town. 3 words that cut deeper than any accusation. Someone here knows. It wasn't written in the official report. It was just a note on a scrap of paper. Tucked into the file. Found years later. 3 words that said everything. The killer wasn't some phantom drifter. Wasn't a ghost. He or she walked Prestonsburg streets. Sat at its lunch counters. Went to its church socials. Someone had seen something. Heard something. Knew something they were too scared. Too ashamed. Or too loyal to tell. Someone in this town knew who smashed Muriel Baldridge's skull and left her gasping in the freezing river mud. And they stayed silent. The cage of fear became a cage of secrets. The friendly town became a place where trust was buried deeper than the truth. The investigation was over. But the whispers? The suspicion? The awful, gnawing question hanging over Prestonsburg? That was just beginning. With the police gone and no answers, Prestonsburg didn't heal. It festered. In kitchens, barbershops, and church basements, the whispers took root. They grew wild, twisted things in the dark soil of fear and doubt. Everyone had a theory. Everyone knew something. But no one knew the truth. The loudest whisper came first. She was pregnant. It started low, a murmur at the back of the drugstore. You notice how thin she looked last month? Then louder. Betty Miller said Muriel cried all afternoon the Tuesday before, said she felt sick. The theory grew thorns. A secret baby. Got herself in trouble. Someone important didn't want the shame. Names floated like poison gas. The Carson boy. His family owned half the town. Good name. Old money. Couldn't have a scandal. Or maybe that young lawyer from Pikeville scene talking to Muriel outside the bank. Smooth talker. Married. Had everything to lose. The whispers painted a dark picture. Muriel tells the father. He panics. Maybe promises help. Lures her out that night. Or maybe threatens her. A desperate meeting by the river turns violent. He silences her. The powerful family closes ranks. Pays off the sheriff. Makes witnesses disappear. It explained the silence. It explained why the investigation hit brick walls. Money talks. The old men muttered into their coffee. Always has in this valley. Then came the Gray Ford theory. Edna Clark swore on her mother's Bible she saw it. Driving slow past her house on Sycamore Street around 6:30 that night. A man behind the wheel. Muriel standing by the passenger window near the old railroad bridge. Edna was wiping dishes, looking out her kitchen window. They was argin', she insisted. Not loud, but intense. Muriel had her arms crossed, looked upset. Then she turned and walked fast toward Maple Street. The car sat there a minute, engine idling, then drove off slow. Real slow. What kind of Ford? Older. Pre-war maybe. Gray. Dull gray. Like primer. The man? Couldn't see clear. Hat pulled low. Shoulders kinda hunched. Was it a stranger? A drifter? Or someone Muriel knew? Someone she'd agreed to meet? The gray Ford became a ghost car. People claimed they'd seen it before. Parked down by the river. Or late at night near the mine entrance. A phantom. A shadow. Proof that evil came from outside. It was comforting. Easier to blame a faceless stranger passing through than the man sitting next to you in the pew. But the darkest theory? The one that slithered into the heart of Prestonsburg and coiled tight? The trusted killer. It was someone she knew. Someone who smiled at her. Someone who lived right here. Because in a town this small, evil doesn't always wear a mask. It doesn't hide in the shadows under the bridge. Sometimes, evil wears Mr. Henderson's old cardigan as he walks to school. Or it wears Bobby Ray's coal-smudged work shirt. Or the friendly grin of the boy who delivered her family's milk every Thursday morning. Think about it. Muriel left her house willingly. She took her school books. She walked a familiar path. She wouldn't have gone quietly with a stranger. Not Muriel. She was careful. But someone she trusted? Someone who said, Hey Muriel, walk with me a sec. I need to talk. Or, your mom sent me. She needs you down at the store. Someone whose face didn't set off alarm bells? The theories got personal. Ugly. Old man Peterson? Lived alone in that rundown house near the bend in the river. Always watching kids walk by. Offered Muriel candy once last summer. She told her mom. Her mom told her to avoid him. Did she avoid him that night? The new preacher's son? Came from the city. Had restless eyes. Always hanging around the high school after practice. Muriel mentioned he made her uncomfortable. Asked her too many questions about where she went after games. Betty Miller herself? Muriel's cousin. Her best friend. Or was she? People remembered Betty looking sour when Muriel got picked for head cheerleader over her. Betty lived right on Maple Street. She was home. But was she really home all night? Could jealousy curdle into something that rotten? And always, the shadow fell back on the ones already questioned. Bobby Ray Haskins. That temper. That public fight. His alibi was the mine. But what if his buddies covered for him? Boys stick together. Especially minors. Especially if one of them did something terrible in a fit of rage. Or Mr. Henderson, the shop teacher. Alone at school. Nervous under questioning. No alibi. Just the empty workshop. The heavy tools. The quiet man nobody really knew. Was that quietness hiding something monstrous? Did Muriel see something in the workshop she shouldn't have? Did he follow her out into the dark? This theory was the most terrifying. because it meant the killer wasn't a monster from a storybook. He was the neighbor who fixed your fence, the teacher who helped your kid with a project, the boy who tipped his hat to your grandmother. Evil lived next door. It smiled at you in church on Sunday morning. It shook your hand at the town picnic. It walked among them, breathing the same air, sharing the same secrets, carrying the knowledge of what it did to Muriel Baldridge in the freezing mud by the river. It meant no one was safe. It meant trust was dead. It meant every friendly face could be a lie. Every kind word could hide a knife. The theories didn't bring answers. They brought poison. Friends stopped talking to friends. Families argued over supper tables. You always liked the Hendersons. Ma, but I tell you, that Walter's eyes are shifty. The Carson boy, never. His mama's a saint. Bobby Ray's got a mean streak. Always did. People started avoiding certain streets. Mothers wouldn't let daughters walk alone. Even in daylight, the town fractured. The shared grief curdled into shared suspicion. The unsolved murder wasn't just a tragedy anymore. It was a sickness infecting every corner of Prestonsburg. The river knew how Muriel died. The coroner knew the brutal mechanics of it. But only one person knew the why. Only one person knew whose hands brought the pipe or the rock down on her head. Only one person knew whose face Muriel saw last in the dim light. A face that maybe, just a moment before, she had smiled at, trusted. That knowledge lived in Prestonsburg, hidden, festering, while Muriel Baldridge lay cold in the ground, and the town she loved slowly tore itself apart, whispering her name in the dark. The funeral was quiet, too quiet for a girl who laughed loud on the cheer squad. They buried Muriel Baldridge on a hillside overlooking the town she'd never leave. Preachers spoke words about angels and God's plan. People cried. Then most of them went home and tried to forget. But inside the white clapboard house on Main Street, forgetting was impossible. Time stopped on December 3rd, 1949. Muriel's mother, Helen, closed her daughter's bedroom door behind her the day after the funeral, and she never really opened it again. Not to change it, not to pack it away. She kept it like a museum to a life cut short. Walk into that room, years later, and it was like stepping into a photograph. The bed was neatly made, the blue and gold cheerleading blanket smoothed across it. On the dresser mirror, pinned with careful pride, were Muriel's ribbons, first place in the regional cheer competition, participant in the county spelling bee, a perfect attendance star from 10th grade. They slowly faded in the sunlight that streamed through the window. Her school books sat stacked neatly on the small desk by the window. Algebra, history. On top, a half-finished letter. Muriel's neat, looping handwriting filled the page. Dear Sarah, it began. Louisville sounds so exciting. I can't believe you got to see the big department store downtown. Things here are pretty quiet. As usual, finals are next week, and I'm nervous about algebra. Betty and I are studying tonight at her place. The letter stopped mid-sentence. The pen lay beside it, uncapped, dried ink clinging to the nib. Helen Baldridge couldn't bear to move it, couldn't bear to cap the pen her daughter last touched. On the chair hung Muriel's favorite sweater, the pale yellow one. It still smelled faintly of the lavender sachet she kept in her drawer. Her saddle shoes sat side by side on the floor near the closet. One still faintly streaked with dried river mud, no one had the heart to wipe clean. Her cheerleading megaphone leaned in the corner. Silent. Helen would go in sometimes. Just sit on the edge of the bed, smooth the blanket, touch the ribbons, hold the unfinished letter. She wouldn't cry, not out loud. The tears had burned themselves dry inside her long ago. She'd just sit, breathing in the ghost of her daughter, a ghost made of wool, ink, and faded ribbon silk. The town tried gestures. Peaburg High School officially retired Muriel's cheerleading number 7. No girl would ever wear it again. They hung a small plaque in the gymnasium, in memory of Muriel Baldridge. Forever our spirit. But the cheers during basketball games sounded a little forced after that. The joy felt thinner. The number 7 gaped like a missing tooth on the squad. Grief lived in the Baldridge house. It sat at their kitchen table. It walked the halls. It became the third person in every room. They didn't talk about it much. Helen and Charlie, Muriel's dad, talking felt like picking at a wound that wouldn't heal. So they fed the ghost of their grief in silence. Ate meals without tasting them. Listened to the radio without hearing it. Watched the world move on outside their window while they stood perfectly still inside. Charlie Baldridge changed. The man who ran the hardware store, who knew every bolt and nail, who could fix anything broke. He'd stare for hours at the front door, the one Muriel walked out of. He stopped whistling, stopped talking to customers much. He'd sit on the porch every evening, long after dark, staring down Maple Street towards Betty's house, as if maybe, just maybe, he'd see a figure in a blue coat walking back. The store suffered. He forgot orders, lost shipments. The shelves grew dusty. People still came, out of pity or loyalty, but the heart had gone out of the place. Charlie's heart had gone out of him. His shoulders, once strong from lifting crates, sagged. His face, usually quick to smile, became etched with deep lines of sorrow. He aged 10 years in 10 months. 10 years after they buried Muriel. Charlie Baldridge sat down in his favorite armchair after a silent supper. He closed his eyes, and his heart simply stopped. The doctor said it was a massive coronary. The neighbors, whispering over fences, said something else. Poor Charlie, died of a broken heart. Just couldn't live without his girl. They buried him next to Muriel on the hillside. The hardware store closed its doors for good. Helen lived alone in the house with the ghost room. She grew thin and quiet as a church mouse. People saw her sometimes, walking slowly to the grocery store. Her eyes always a little distant, like she was seeing a different street, a different time. And Prestonsburg? The town did what small towns do with things too ugly, too painful to face. It swept Muriel Baldridge's murder under the rug, like coal dust brushed off a porch. You didn't see it anymore, but you knew it was there, gritty underfoot. People stopped saying her name out loud. It became a taboo word, spoken only, in hushed tones behind closed doors. You know, the Baldridge girl. The story wasn't told to newcomers. It wasn't discussed at the dinner table. When the anniversary of December 3rd rolled around each year, the town held its breath. No memorials, no articles in the local paper, just a heavy silence that settled over Main Street like fog. They rerouted the high school homecoming parade so it wouldn't pass the Baldridge house. Mothers stopped letting their daughters walk alone on Maple Street after dusk. Long after the streetlights came on, the old railroad bridge near where Edna Clark saw the gray Ford became a place kids dared each other to run past at night. Muriel's ghost walks there, they'd whisper, shivering. But it wasn't her ghost they were afraid of. It was the memory of the real evil that had touched their town. Murder wasn't supposed to happen in Prestonsburg. It was a thing for newspapers, for cities far away. It shattered the illusion of safety, the belief that knowing everyone meant being safe from everyone. Facing that truth was too hard, so they buried it, alongside Muriel, alongside Charlie, alongside their own innocence. The plaque in the gym gathered dust. Muriel's ribbons in her silent room faded almost white. The unfinished letter to Sarah in Louisville yellowed at the edges. The blue hydrangeas Helen once tended so carefully in the front yard grew wild, then withered. The empty chair remained, by the desk in Muriel's room, at the Baldridge kitchen table, in the heart of a town that chose silence over truth. What survived wasn't justice, wasn't answers. It was absence, a hole shaped like a 17-year-old girl that never, ever filled in. All that was left was the quiet, the dust, and the ghost of a life that ended on a cold riverbank, while the town it belonged to looked away. 75 years, 3/4 of a century. Generations have lived and died in Prestonsburg since that cold December night. The coal mines that define the town have mostly closed. The Star Theater is a parking lot. The old high school where Muriel cheered was torn down decades ago. Time moves on. It smooths rough edges. It fades memories. But not this one. Not completely. Officially, in the musty evidence room of the Floyd County Courthouse, Muriel Baldridge's case is still marked open. It's just a single, yellowed folder now. Thin, the paper brittle, the typed reports faded. Inside are black and white photos that don't capture her smile, just the terrible stillness by the river. Witness statements from people long gone. The coroner's blunt words about the head wound, the drowning, and that scribbled note on a scrap of paper. Someone here knows. No arrests, no charges, no day in court, no justice, just the weight of a question mark hanging over a girl's life. All that's left for the world to see is a stone, up on the hillside cemetery. It's simple, just her name, Muriel Jane Baldridge. 2 dates, born April 12th, 1932, died December 3rd, 1949, 17 years, 220 days. The space between those dates is too small, criminally small. It holds all the laughter she never got to have, the children she never raised, the nursing degree she never earned, the growing old she never did. So why, after all this time, do we keep looking? Why dig up this old pain? Why tell this story again? Because Muriel Baldridge wasn't just a victim, wasn't just a headline in a forgotten newspaper, wasn't just a cautionary tale whispered by mothers to daughters. She was a person, a real, breathing, dreaming, 17-year-old girl. She loved the sticky sweetness of lemonade on a hot Kentucky summer day, gulping it down after cheer practice. She hated algebra tests, her brow furrowing in concentration. She dreamed of being a nurse, maybe at the big hospital in Lexington, helping people, making a difference. She blushed when the boy she liked looked her way. She giggled with Betty over silly jokes no one else understood. She got annoyed at her little brother for borrowing her hairbrush. She worried about her finals. She loved her parents. She walked familiar streets feeling safe. She was ordinary, beautifully, heartbreakingly ordinary. Just a girl. That's why we can't look away. Because forgetting Muriel Baldridge feels like a second betrayal. Sweeping her under the rug, letting her become just a name on a cold stone. A dusty file in a cabinet, it means the silence one. It means the person who did this. Or the people who know who did this. Got exactly what they wanted. Oblivion. And Prestonsburg isn't alone. There's a Muriel Baldridge in almost every town like mine. A name etched too soon on a gravestone in a quiet cemetery on the edge of town. A case file grown dusty in a back room. A story folded up and tucked away because it was too ugly, too messy, too hard to solve, or because facing it meant facing the uncomfortable truth that evil doesn't always come from outside. Sometimes it lives right down the street. Maybe it's the factory worker's wife who vanished on her way to the grocery store in 1962. Maybe it's the young mechanic found beaten behind his own garage in 1978. Maybe it's the high school student who never made it home from a party in 1995. Their photos sit in drawers. Their families carry a grief that never softens. Their towns might have moved on, painted over the cracks, built new stores on the corners where tragedy happened. But the past isn't gone. It's buried alongside the victims. Their stories, their hopes, their ordinary lives cut brutally short, deserve more than to be forgotten dirt under the shiny new pavement of progress. They deserve their names spoken, their lives remembered, not just as victims, but as the people they were. Telling Muriel's story isn't about digging up bones for spectacle. It's about refusing to let the darkness win. It's about shining a light, however faint after 75 years, back onto that frozen riverbank and saying, this mattered. She mattered. It's about acknowledging that the silence of a town, the turning away, the sweeping under the rug, is its own kind of violence. It extends the crime. Maybe no one will ever be arrested for what happened to Muriel Baldridge. Maybe the person who did it is dead. Maybe the secret died with them. Or maybe, just maybe, someone reading this right now knows a name. An old story their grandpa drunkenly mumbled once. A confession overheard by a child long ago. Not understood until now. A nagging suspicion about a relative who always acted strange around that time. Hope for answers flickers. Weak but persistent, like a single candle in a vast, dark room. But even if the truth never surfaces, there's power in remembrance. Power in saying her name out loud. Muriel Baldridge. Not the Baldridge girl. Not that cheerleader. Who was murdered. Muriel. A girl who loved lemonade and dreamed of being a nurse. When we remember her, we remember all the others. The ones whose cases grew cold. The ones whose towns wanted to forget. The ones buried not just in the ground, but under layers of shame, fear, or indifference. Their stones are silent, but we don't have to be. So we tell this story. For Muriel. For Charlie and Helen Baldridge, who lived with a broken heart until they couldn't. For the town that carries a hidden scar. For every unsolved mystery whispering from the past. For every Muriel waiting. Somewhere. For someone to simply say her name. To remember she was here. She was real. And what happened to her was a terrible wrong that time alone cannot erase. We look because turning away feels like abandoning her all over again. We look because the truth, however buried, deserves the light. We look because sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do against the silence is to speak. Muriel Jane Baldridge. We remember you. That note in the file was right. Someone knew. Someone still might know. The truth about what happened to Muriel Baldridge on December 3rd, 1949, didn't vanish with the witnesses or fade with the years. It's out there, hidden in an attic box of letters, half remembered in a grandmother's bedtime story, lurking in the silence of a family name too powerful to question. The river kept its secret, but people rarely do. Not forever. So now it's your turn. What do you think happened that night in Prestonsburg? Does the Grey Ford theory hold weight? Was it a secret someone killed to protect? Or was it someone Muriel knew, smiling at her in the lamplight before the darkness fell? I've laid out the pieces, the whispers, the suspects, the dead ends, but the puzzle isn't finished. Maybe you see a connection I missed, a name that fits, a detail that clicks. Share your theories down below. Was it Bobby Ray's temper? Mr. Henderson's nervous alibi? A shadow from a powerful family? Or someone else entirely, lost to the official record, but remembered in your family's stories? Don't hold back. Sometimes the smallest fragment, shared in the open, is the one that finally cracks the case. And if Prestonsburg's tragedy feels familiar, if your hometown has its own unsolved mystery, its own ghost story rooted in a real, aching loss, I need to hear that too. Tell us about it. Say their name. Shine a light on the case file gathering dust in your county courthouse. Because Muriel's story isn't unique. It's a chilling echo of secrets buried in small towns everywhere. Secrets that deserve the air. Share this video. Not for clicks. Not for views. Share it because stories like Muriel's dissolve in silence. Share it to pass her name, Muriel Jane Baldridge, to someone new. Someone who might recognize the gray Ford from an old photograph. Someone who might remember a grandfather's guilty glance toward the river. Someone who holds the missing piece. Say her name out loud. Right now. Wherever you are. Muriel Baldridge. Say it for the girl who loved lemonade and dreamed of being a nurse. Say it for Charlie and Helen, who carried their grief like stones. Say it for every town that tried to forget its darkest night. When we say her name, we refuse the silence. We defy the forgetting. We tell the secret. We still see you. 75 years is a long time for a secret to stay buried. But Earth shifts. Rivers change course. Old loyalties crumble. Consciences crack. Some secrets don't stay buried forever. The truth about Muriel Baldridge is still out there, waiting for the light.